There are two ways to reference your cells, relative and absolute. The difference between them is just whether or not you lock your referenced cells. Let's look at relative first. Suppose that you need to calculate revenue all the way down. So we know revenue is price times quantity. We know how to autofill. One way to think of autofill is that it is copying the selected formula all the way down. Now, it would be pretty useless if it only copied this calculation and it produces $49.99 and 95 cents all the way down. That's why when you autofill down, the reference moves down with you. It moves relative to you. So you've been using relative reference all this time. But sometimes you don't want the reference to move. Sometimes you want to lock it down. Suppose you want to calculate the percent of sales. That is just looking for the percent of each of these revenues compared to the total. Basically, what you would do is this divided by this, the second number divided by the total, the third number divided by total, the fourth number divided by the total. To do that, we would take the first revenue divided by the total. Format this into percent. Now let's see what happens if we don't lock the cell. A good way to find out what happened is to click into these cells. Do you see the problem? It is taking 10,000 divided by a blank cell. The next one is taking 4,700 divided by this blank cell. And the next one is doing the same. What's happening is that even though the first one is dividing by the total, when you autofill, these red boxes, they move relative to your cell. So when you move down, the red referenced cell moves down with you. Now, let's learn how to lock it. To lock this cell, put a $sign before D and a $sign before 8. Now, the cell is locked. No matter which way you autofill, either to the right or down, it will never leave D8. Now, let's autofill. It looks right, but let's click in here to investigate. You see how each of these revenue is dividing by the total. The total is not moving down because it is locked. To get into a little bit more detail, this $sign means lock. And here we have $sign in front of D and $sign in front of 8. What that means is that it is locking the column and the row. So technically, since we are only autofilling down, we don't actually have to lock column D. So let's try that. Let's not lock column D and only lock row 8. As you can see, the result is the same. Now, if we drag this to the right, you can see the blue reference cell has moved right and the red reference cell has moved right because this column is not locked. It is a good idea to understand that you can lock just the row or just the column. Let's look at another example. In this scenario, the professor would like to curve students' exam 1 scores. He doesn't know how much to curve it yet. Curving in this case is just adding more points. We're going to put in how much we're going to curve by in C1 later, but right now we can just set it up. Exam 1 score plus cell C1, which is a blank right now. Now remember to lock it because you don't want this reference cell to move down. I'll change the format back to general. Now we can simply autofill. These new scores remain the same because each of these scores is adding this blank cell. Now comes the fun part. Let's curve everyone's score by 5 points. What about 8 points? What about 6 points? Because student 1 doesn't really deserve to fail, but just barely. See how it recalculates each time. Again, this is the power of Excel. Since the cell is referenced, you can play around with the results by changing just this cell. Sometimes you want to see the accumulated percentages, kind of like a running total of the percentages. Basically, each new cell is the total of the new percentage and the current total. It's easier if we just get into it. The new percentage here is 15%. What's the current total? There's nothing before this. So simply reference this cell. In the next cell, what is the new percentage? 32%. Reference it. What is the current total? It's 15%. For this one, 14% is the new percentage, and the new total is 47%. See how there's a pattern? So we can actually just autofill it. You can see how each of these new accumulated percent is really just a sum of everything before it. Therefore, the very last one is a sum of everything. Therefore, it's 100%. Hope that wasn't too confusing. If you have any questions, just comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you.